Start with desire, maintain with curiosity, avoid shoulds. Cool. Okay, moving forth. What next? Okay, let me have a look at my old presentations. That's my half-year reset from 2022. Okay, so I did problem hierarchy. I used to do how you're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, generally, and then like creating goals off that. But like, it's like you're adding to people's plate of their goals. So like the way that the life mat works, you do 3 priorities. And like when you do those 3 priorities, like one of them might be about how you've been feeling emotionally, like maybe solving a problem there. Or one of them might be about how you've been feeling physically. But I feel like doing it this way it's like limiting you, but it's also making like more work and effort. Like you're having to focus on more things because you're focusing on, firstly, physically, mentally, emotionally, generally, and then also like the self-care pillars. So like sleep, water, nutrition, movement, nature, connection. We would do one goal for each of these things. Not a goal necessarily, but like an action you would take. So like, I'm going to start setting an alarm at this consistent time. I'm going to buy a new drink bottle, whatever. But again, that is a lot of different things to focus on. And I feel like we've been doing self-care pillars for ages now. I feel like we've got it a bit down pat now. And so I think I'm wanting to strip all these things away. It's a lot of things to answer, and it's great. Like, if you want to answer all these questions and really get to know yourself and think about how you've been feeling and reflecting on that and all that, it's so beneficial, honestly. But I just feel like, this reset, it's going to be different. So again, how do you want to feel? Yes, now that we've done this and we're in the practice of focusing on how we want to feel instead of what we want to achieve, this can be an undercurrent to our next reset. So for example, I have these goals that I'm wanting to work towards, but it's not about I want to achieve this thing. It's I want to achieve this thing because it's going to make me feel a certain way. And so I feel like having that as an undercurrent is great instead of having it be the main focus. So I might make that, what's it called? Like a reminder, maybe. Okay, so then it was things to increase and decrease. So what are the positive things you want to increase? What are the negative things you want to decrease? At the start of the year, or at least the way I'm doing the reset this year, it's like, what broader intentions are you wanting to work towards? Bigger goals that are going to take a lot of little things to achieve them. Like, what do you want to do? And then how are you going to do that? And then I feel like this is a lot more, like narrow. Like, I think a big part of why this reset is really different for me this year is I'm really happy in my life. I think in the past I was really struggling. And so this kind of reset is really helpful when you have a lot of negatives and not many positives and you're trying to like balance out. So I had a lot of negativity and not much positivity. And so I was trying to increase the positivity and decrease the negativity to try to get more balanced. But now I'm feeling balanced. It's like, okay, I'm here. I don't really need to increase the positivity anymore or decrease negativity. I'm like, obviously not perfect. Life is not perfect, but I'm a lot more balanced. And so now that I'm balanced and I have a strong foundation, I'm now able to create intentions and big goals and work towards things because I'm coming from a balanced place of I'm looking after myself and I'm feeling positive and all of that stuff. So I think that's a really important distinction I've made. So the previous resets have been very much about creating balance. And this one is once you feel like you're balanced, it's like the next step after that. Okay, so now that I know that, isn't it so funny? We went through the whole reset. So like all of this stuff we had to do, answer questions, whatever. And then it's like setting your intention was like an afterthought. It was right at the end. It's like, okay, so if you feel like setting some goals, like set them. And what do you want your 2022 to look like? And do you have any projects you want to do? And honestly, when we got to this slide, it was often like everyone was kind of burnt out and done anyway. So it was like people barely, wrote stuff. So I just find that really interesting. But let me go to, I had like a draft for this Christmas reset that we're supposed to be doing, which like I'm kind of tempted to use because the new layout is kind of, okay, no, it'll be fine. Okay, so this was the draft. Everyone bring a laptop, blah, blah, blah. How do you want to feel? See, this is just like obviously copying my previous one. But again, I don't want to do any of that. Delete. What actions can you take? Now that you know how you want to feel, choose 2 actions for each category. Again, 1 to 2 actions for each category. Like why? That might not be someone's priority. Like how they want to feel emotionally might not be one of their priorities, or how they want to feel physically might not be one of their priorities. Like it is important to think about those things, but I just don't think that you don't want to like force a priority onto someone. Yeah, most negative. Again, balance. Like this is all about balance, self-care pillars, an undercurrent, setting your intentions. Again, these last ones are like this is basically where I want to sit now. Like we've done all the other work. We don't need to rehash it. So instead of projects and goals, because I think that's how I thought about it in the past, I want to make it priorities. I love the word priorities because I feel like it immediately put that motivation behind the intention, because intention feels like a very relaxed word. Well, I intended to do it, but I didn't. Whereas priority is like, no, this is happening. Like, yeah, priority is the better word. So let's just go into our presentation. Okay, so we're going to say, we'll just like start making it. It always changes over time. Setting priorities. Setting priorities. Okay. I feel like all the Christmas stuff is really distracting, honestly. I like the snow. I mean, yeah. Okay, whatever. Now, I feel like that cannot be the only question, because what I would have set for myself changed a lot when I read the prompts from Michelle B's life map. So one of the main things I wanted to do was find, that's right, vision-based. Like, as in visual-based. When you're setting your priorities, think about the outcome as like a visual thing. So helpful. It changed everything. Okay, so I feel like I want to put the question at the bottom of the slide, because I don't want people to read that first, like what are my priorities, and then they start thinking about their priorities without having been primed with like the really important like way to think about this, which is vision-based. Okay, I might say before setting priorities. I'm so excited to be doing a different reset. I feel like we've been doing the same thing over and over, and it's not that it hasn't worked, it's totally worked. That's the whole thing. And that's what I've realized is those resets have worked to make me more balanced, make my life more balanced. And now we're doing something different. And I hope that my friends are in the same boat, that they're feeling balanced. And obviously, maybe I'll provide like the previous reset if they're wanting to do that again because they're still not feeling balanced. I can provide like the slides from the last reset. But I feel like if they're wanting to create intention, priorities, goals, I'm so excited. This is going to be good. Okay. I think there's so much stigma around not sticking to your goals. Like you set intentions at the start of the year, and by the middle of the year or like 2 weeks in or whatever it is, you no longer feel motivated to do those goals. And obviously there's a lot of things that go into that. And it's not just like, as soon as you lose motivation, you don't need to do that goal anymore, just change it. It's like not about that. It's about setting up a system. But if you're not even wanting the outcome anymore because of other reasons, not just you forgot about it or just stopped working on it, whatever it is, like there's lots of reasons why we stop working towards goals, but I feel like the stigma creates resistance. Sticking to a goal just because you set it is not a reason to stick to a goal. Trying to stick to a goal because you still want the outcome is the reason that you should stick to a goal. I feel like I never put full stops, but I feel like I'm putting full stops at the end of everything because I'm like, this is important. I feel like I'll just remove them. Okay. I just love priorities because it encapsulates a goal, like a project that you're wanting to work on. It encapsulates like a mindset shift that you're wanting to work on. It encapsulates, mental health or physical health. Like it can be anything really. A priority it can be anything. And so, yeah, I feel like it's the perfect word for, instead of intention, instead of goal, it's the perfect word to use for the things that we're wanting to focus on. That's the other thing. Your priorities are not supposed to be comparing what you want to what you currently have. Your vision is not about what you don't currently have or like, I need to be better than I am now. It's like, what do you want to be? Like, forget about what you are. what do you want to be, or what do you want to achieve? And then the reflection and the contrasting comes later. Like, don't think about it when you're making the thing, but then we're gonna think about the comparison a little bit later, like when we're contrasting it. So I feel like, but it's important not to think about it right now. Yeah, okay, I feel like that makes sense. Like, instead of putting the question at the end makes so much more sense. When thinking about outcomes, like you're giving all of the, yes, okay, yes. I love it when it starts working. Okay. The really good thing about doing a brainstorm is you write down other priorities. So instead of trying to just work out which 3 priorities you're wanting to do, you might think of 10 priorities and then you narrow it down to the top 3. But then you also have a list of things that might be tempting to switch to. And you might, with intention, partway through the year, decide to switch to a different priority. But knowing the priorities that you could potentially be tempted to switch to, being aware of it makes that less likely to happen. So when you hit a roadblock and you're like, oh, like I might just start doing this other random project that was on my list, but you know it was on your list. So I don't know, I feel like it's less likely to happen when you're aware of the other priorities that could potentially take over. It's really interesting, some of the questions, because they are conflicting. Like, as in, some of them are like, what has the biggest impact versus what's the most fun? And I feel like the important thing about your priorities is picking kind of a mix of different things. So not necessarily making them like all like the most fun thing, because obviously sometimes the thing that might not be as fun, but it has the biggest return on investment, or it has the biggest impact on everything else in your life, sometimes you need to pick those priorities. And so I feel like having a mix is important. So not just doing the things that have the largest return on investment, but yeah, having a few of each, or one of each, or whatever. I really want this to be like a fresh new feeling, and I feel like it's just looking not how I envisaged it. So I feel like I need to get rid of that. I feel like I need to go for something, I don't know how I want it to look, but I feel like I'll know it when I see it. Okay, maybe I go off, I made some PDF things for my priorities, which I'm going to do another video on, but maybe I can use the look from those. So I might just, okay. I feel like we're getting somewhere. Okay, I'm very much preferring this style. I feel like I've got the bulk of it there. I just want to make sure I've got it as clear as possible, and as easy to follow as possible is the key. And I might add in some breaks, as I mentioned. But yeah, I'm feeling really good about where I'm leaving it today, but I will probably cut to tomorrow. Yeah, calling it a night. So it's been a few days since I started working on this presentation. I think it's finished. I'm going to run through it one last time and show you what it's ended up like. I might make some tweaks as I go through, but it's mostly done. The reset is in 2 days, so it kind of has to be done. So it's a Christmas life reset, because we always do it just after Christmas, and I still have all my Christmas decorations up. So it's like a little bit of a Christmas party with my friends, and also our life reset. So I wanted to use this first slide to explain the difference between our previous resets and this new one, to sort of remember what we used to do and then what we're about to do. So the old resets were about creating balance, and then the new one is going to have all of those things as an undercurrent, and then we're going to choose 3 priorities, design experiments around those priorities, manage our obstacles, and check in objectively throughout the year. So the next slide is reminders. So this is the mindset that we're wanting to be in, to come from a place of self-compassion and avoid judgment. And then we're going to start with desire and joy. So that's where our goals or our priorities are going to come from. And then we're going to maintain with curiosity. So whilst we're doing our experiments and throughout the year, as we're checking in, like, that's interesting that I wasn't able to do the thing that I set out to do, or that's interesting that the way I thought it was going to go kind of shifted, but this actually is a better way to do it. So just being curious instead of judgmental is basically where we're wanting to sit. And then avoiding shoulds. So we're not going to be, I should do this, I should do that. And then the next one is a bit random, but it's these goals are not ammunition. And what I mean is that we don't want to use these goals to beat ourselves up or berate ourselves later down the track. So a lot of times people set New Year's resolutions or goals at the start of the year, and then as they progress through the year and they forget about them or other things come up, they look back at those goals and use that as evidence that they're like not good enough. But that is not what we're wanting. When we set these priorities, it's from a place of compassion, and because we're being curious, there's no way to fail. That's like saying when you hypothesize an experiment and then it doesn't go the way you hypothesized, that's not a failure. That's just a different outcome to what you're expecting. So we're going to just keep working at it and not berate ourselves when it doesn't go as we hypothesize. So the last one is that this is a self-trust exercise. If we're setting goals that we don't actually think we can achieve, then we're kind of setting ourselves up to lose trust in ourselves. So what we're doing is we're trying to create experiments, especially short-term experiments, that we can use to build our self-trust. And the more we can trust ourselves, the more likely we are to follow through with future goals. So I feel like I've built up a lot of self-trust in the last few years because I've set out to make mindset shifts and changes in my habits and changes in my relationship with myself. And I feel like I've done those things. And so now when I head into a new year, like 2024, and I have these priorities, I'm confident that I'm going to be able to make a difference. And if I don't, that's okay. I can tweak my experiments, change the way I do things. But I trust myself enough to know that I'm capable of following through with my goals. So the next slide is where we get into the actual reset. So before setting our priorities, we're going to brainstorm what those priorities might be. And I feel like brainstorming is really important, because if you try to just set your 3 priorities, they might not be the right priorities, or they might not be worded in the right way or focusing on quite the right thing. I think it takes a bit of brainstorming to really flesh out exactly what you're wanting your 2024 to look like, or at least the first part of it. So this slide has a few dot points on it, which are more mindsets that we're wanting to sort of keep as we go through the reset. So we've brainstormed our priorities, and then the next step is actually setting our priorities. So which ones do you feel most compelled to choose? Which ones are the most fun and exciting? Which ones have the biggest impact or the biggest return on investment? And then just making sure that there's no should energy attached to the priorities that you end up picking. So once we have our top 3 priorities, we're just going to have a short break. So that's like the first half of the reset. It's really only these 2 slides. But as I said in part 1, when I was working through my old resets, I realized there was a lot of build-up that we didn't really need anymore. So we're just focusing on brainstorming priorities for the year and then setting our top 3 priorities. And then we're going to have a short break where we can discuss our wins. And then we're going to move on to the second half of the reset. So the second half is about setting our experiments from a curiosity mindset. We're going to first brainstorm what our main experiment is going to be to start off 2024. And then I've just got some questions and statements to get us thinking. The dot points on this slide are a little bit random, but I feel like they all sat under this curiosity mindset. Some of them are reminders, some of them are mindsets or questions you want to ask yourself to just really think about creating experiments that you'll actually follow through with and trial. It's really important to create not the perfect experiment, but the perfect experiment for you as an individual. Everyone is so different. As part of building that self-trust, we're wanting to create an experiment we're actually going to try, not something we wish we would do or like hope that we're going to do, but something we're actually going to try and implement. And if it doesn't work, trying something different. Let's say your priority is movement. So you're wanting to build more exercise into your weekly routine. It's easy to think, okay, what is the perfect experiment? What is the perfect thing I can do, system I can build to exercise more? But a far better way to personalize your experiment is to think about why you aren't exercising already. Because I'm sure that you've tried many different ways to build this habit, and thinking about all the ways you tried and why they might not have worked is a faster route to getting to a way that will work. Because you've done all the trials. You've done the trials and had the errors, and there's no point doing the same thing again. It might be a slight tweak to what you've done in the past, or maybe you can think of a period of time where it was working. So for example, I was doing park run for a while where I would get up on a Saturday morning and go for an 8 a.m. run with a bunch of people in my community at a local park. And even though no one cared if I was there, like it's not like there was actual accountability, you don't really sign up for it, you just rock up at 8 o'clock like everyone else, but it felt like some accountability. That period of time, I exercised a lot more because I had a bit of accountability. So I can reflect on that and think, okay, accountability is a really good way to motivate myself. However, why did I stop? So why aren't I doing park runs? I found that 5Ks was a little bit too long for me. I'm a pretty slow runner, and so it was taking me almost 40 minutes to run 5Ks, and running for 40 minutes just ended up being really boring. So I decided I wanted to do 3K runs just around my neighborhood, but because I didn't have the accountability of the park run, I ended up falling off and not doing the 3K runs. But again, reflecting on what I've done in the past, what worked, what didn't work about it, and adapting that to a new experiment you can try is a really helpful way to go about it. So the last line I really love is, what are you going to try first to make the vision come to life? And I feel like it's a good way to think about it. Instead of what are you going to do and expecting it to work the first time, you're kind of expecting it not to work, and it might. Like the first thing you try might be the perfect thing for you, but expecting it not to work is better, because then if it doesn't, you can move on. Okay, next thing to try. But I really like that. What are you going to try first? It's just a really good mindset to have, especially like with the curiosity and experiments and being really flexible with it instead of being rigid, like I'm going to run 3 times a week for the next 6 months. And like, if you don't do that, thinking you're a failure. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it. Okay, and then your experiments. So the actions you're going to take, and then you contrast that with your current reality, and then the obstacles you're going to face. So the next slide is the plan. So you have your experiment, but then you might think of ways that you can implement that experiment, or the mindset shifts that you might need, environmental changes you can do, like the things you can actually do to sort of support. Like these are all the things that can support your experiments and your priorities in general. And then what about your plan changes when you're feeling terrible? That last line I think is really key, and it's linked to that line on the first slide. Plan for the brain you have, not the brain you wish you had. So the fact that we do feel terrible on some days, and if you're trying to do some kind of habit or routine that requires some consistency, what are you going to do when you wake up and you're feeling terrible or you're having a bad day? And it's not about pushing through and, making sure that you continue consistently. It's about really considering what's going to happen on that day. Are you just going to pause the habit for that day but then how are you going to get back to it? Like thinking about what changes on those days and how you're going to work with yourself, no matter what your energy levels are or your mood or anything like that. Like, how are you going to work around that? Because a lot of the time when we're planning our habits and routines and our goals, we're thinking about our best self, because this is really motivating. Like doing a reset feels so motivating. Every time we all come out of it, we're like, oh, we're just so ready to like get going and hit goals. But inevitably we'll find ourselves not feeling as motivated or as good. And we need to plan for that. We need to plan for the brain that we have, a brain that sometimes feels low energy or sometimes has a low mood, and work with that version of ourselves as well as the motivated one. So the last slide before I give some examples of the experiments that I'm doing, these are just some of the things that I feel like would be really helpful. I'm ignoring whether to even keep this slide. I feel like some of them are helpful, and I guess I'm printing off the slides to give to people so they can look at this later and flick between all of the different mindsets and all the different points. So lastly, I've got 3 of my experiments that I'm trialing for my priorities next year. So I've got a movement trigger toolkit for trying to include more movement in my life. I've got the Great Edit Race. So that's for my YouTube channel, trying to create more videos and sort of race the current week to try to get ahead with editing more videos. And then I've got Resolute Revision. So that's for the book that I'm writing. I finished the first draft and I'm wanting to revise it. So I wanted a way to, basically some kind of system to revise my book. So this is what I created. So these are just little examples of what I'm doing for my priorities. I felt like it was really helpful to have like a visual, and I just wanted to give some examples for people, just ideas of what they might be able to do for their priorities as well. So that's the reset. I'm really excited. It's in 2 days. I'm really excited to get feedback from my friends to see what they think of it. And I'd love to hear your feedback if you go through and do this. I'm going to provide the slides for this presentation. I hope you've enjoyed watching the process behind creating one of these, and I would love to hear how your resets go and what your priorities are for 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.